Most excellent. All right. Hello, everyone. I am Kat Gordon, your moderator for the self publishing debate Kindle Unlimited versus Publishing Wide. So, a few super quick things about myself. I'm an autistic, disabled, and queer author of speculative fiction that celebrates diverse body minds. My latest novel, the disability hope punk adventure, Iris and the Crew Tear Through Space, won a 2023 Indie Ink Award for disability representation. I'm also the co editor of the disability fiction anthologies Nothing Without Us and Nothing Without Us Too. And last but not least, I'm the host and producer of the Disabled Crone podcast. I have been so looking forward to this panel because, as I said before we started recording, I'm just trying to sit here looking pretty, asking questions, getting my front row seat to ask the experts about this particular topic. I myself have been published by a small press, but I'm going indie next year. So I am so looking forward to what our panelists have to say today. And enough about me. Hello. Let's meet our panelists. So let's start with KJ Harwick. KJ, can you briefly tell us something about yourself?
Yes, hi, I'm KJ Harwick. I'm a fantasy and science fiction author. I am also the co-founder and owner of I Know Why She Stayed. Um, I am currently in Austin and it is hotter than hell down here, but I'm inside a nice, cozy room with the AC blasting, so it's very comfortable. Uh, I went indie probably about 5 or 6 years ago, whenever I published my first book. And honestly, it was the best decision I ever made. I had been struggling for years to try to get an agent and then to try to get a small publisher. And I finally realized that my books belonged in a different space. So I took it to that different space and never looked back.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Draco, would you please tell the audience a bit about yourself?
I'm Draco. I am a queer romance author. So almost all of my books are MM romance. I have been self-published since 2011. I have had one brief time where I was signed to a small press and didn't work out. So, but basically my entire writing career, I've been self-published. And yeah, I have 11 books out now. I have 13 that were total, but like one of them is part of a anthology from a group on Goodreads. The rest are all my own personal releases. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm here in Arizona and Phoenix right now, so I'm pretty sure it's relatively hot here because it always is. But I'm in the air.
Thank you so much for that. Dax, could you please say a few words about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Dax. This is my dog Shadow. Unfortunately, I do not think my cat will be joining us today. But I write speculative fiction, primarily fantasy. I'm queer, disabled, and a member of the Kraken Collective, which is a queer speculative fiction like indie alliance. Um, I have been self-publishing since 2017, I think. I tried to go traditional. But I got asked if I could make my lesbians straight, and I said no. So I was like, I don't want to keep getting this response. This was like 2011, so it was a while ago. And I was like, I'm just gonna go indie.
Yeah, that
Um,
sounds like a good choice.
yeah. I was like, I'm not gonna deal with this. Yeah, that's me, and this is my dog Shadow.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, let's unpack this topic. And we'll begin with Kindle Unlimited. Can you folks share what advantages or disadvantages have you experienced using Kindle Unlimited? You know, it's fun. I have to tell you, I keep wanting to say Kindle United, like I'm thinking that's some kind of rebellion front. Um, but we can start with, let's start with Draco.
Um, the one real advantage that I kind of felt I had when I was, or I did have my books in Kindle Unlimited was honestly, the freedom to offer like 3 days, where for each quarter they give you 5 days, I think, to let your book be free or discounted or whatever, and, to boost visibility. Um, To me, the disadvantage really was the fact that for myself, a lot of my more loyal fan base is actually overseas. And at least, especially when I started out, a lot of them didn't have Amazon at all. Like I had one of my most faithful readers was in Australia. He's like, we don't have Amazon. I need you to put it somewhere else. I don't know if they have it now, but they did not at that time. So to me, that was a bit of a disadvantage. And then also just the state of the world where it is and the way that people are kind of anti-Amazon right now. Leaving, ourselves exclusive to me becomes a disadvantage when, a lot of people are like, I would love to read your book, but I don't want to be on Amazon.
Right, right, absolutely. That I'm glad you mentioned that. I'd love to come back to that later in the discussion because I think that's a great point. Dax, please.
I have my books in Kindle Unlimited. I think for 2018 and 2019 and 2020, those were some like tough years for me. So I did not have the bandwidth, the batteries to do any of my own marketing. I had a lot of stuff going on health-wise and with family. So I was like, I'll just take I originally published Wide. I took my stuff out of Wide and put it just in Kindle Unlimited, thinking that like the algorithm would do the work for me while I was busy taking care of myself and my family. Um, I made $37 in
Oh my,
those 3 years that were KU. The KU page reads in those 3 years was 37 total. Um, and I realized that the kind of stuff that I wrote wasn't what KU readers like. So I was writing epic fantasy with lesbians, and that is not the Kindle Unlimited audience. Um, so it wasn't doing me any favors. And also, like, I write for an audience that likes to stick it to the man, and so they don't buy on Amazon because they're sticking it to the man. I'm like, well, okay. I have to be where my readers are. And so I went Wide because that's where my readers are.
I mean, that's fair, totally fair. Thank you for that. KJ.
Yeah, Dex actually brings up a really interesting point. With Kindle Unlimited, you really have to be part of sort of their audience. And what I mean by that is if you write, like middle grade, middle grade does really, really well in traditional because you can get into libraries, you can get into schools, and that's kind of where all of that market is. But if you release a middle grade on Amazon, you're sort of fighting an uphill battle, and especially, with if you're just strictly KU, because you can't post it anywhere else. So you really have to know how to leverage into that audience, and you're still, you're swimming in a sea of romance readers, of romantic fantasy readers, romantasy. KU is very specific in in what audience is there. I think especially with romance readers, over the years they've been told a lot. Well, like Dax said, it's not a straight romance. We don't want it, or it's a little too fantasy or it's too sci-fi or there's too much sex. I've had critique partners that have they've been with agents and the agent was trying to push them to take the sex out. And they're like, no, this is part of the romance. It's supposed to be sort of part of the growth.
Yeah.
And it was because they were fighting publishers. Publishers didn't want sex. They wanted to keep the sex in. So with KU, that's where all these romance readers went. And these romantic fantasy readers is they want those boundaries to be pushed. They want the sex, they want the fantasy, and they want it completely intertwined.
Right.
And some of the best stories I've read are romantic fantasy. I have another friend who she just came flying off the shelf. She had all these books written, finally decided to go indie, and people love her stuff because the romance is so intense, but the fantasy world building is so wonderful that it feels like it just integrates so seamlessly. So that's kind of been what I found with KU is if you're not really part of that audience, or if your books don't seem to fit on that shelf, it's kind of a struggle to be there.
Mm,
You have to market 2 times as much or 3 times as much. And it doesn't mean you won't succeed. It just means you have to kind of spin things in a unique and interesting way to really get that visibility. Because if you look at fantasy, half of what's up there that shows in those top results are people that have been there for 20, 30 years writing romantic fantasy.
right.
And
Yeah.
they're indie. And then the other half is, George R. R. Martin, the big
Big
names.
names.
Like, wait
Yeah.
a minute, where's the in between? So,
Right. Okay, great. No, thank you. These are some great points. Like I was not aware of some of these points that are brought up. So that's wonderful. So, okay, we have some opinions about the Kindle Unlimited. It's not Kindle United, people. I don't know why you keep thinking that. Um, what does going wide mean? I mean, yes, obviously it's going beyond the parameters of Kindle Unlimited. But what platforms have you folks used to distribute your works? Which ones have really worked for you, and which ones do you avoid? Let's start with Dax.
So for me, going wide is more of a philosophy and not necessarily a set of platforms. So it's going where your readership is. And a lot of my readership is into indie stuff and buying directly and also on itch.io. So those are the two platforms that I invest the most in, is making sure my direct store is like hard hitting, I guess,
Yeah.
and that my itch.io pages look great. Um, but I also use Draft to Digital to get on some other platforms, and especially into libraries. Libraries have also been a good source of income. Um, if for people who aren't aware, traditional publishers, if they want their book on Libby, they charge libraries like $50.
Whoa.
And so and that comes with like a certain count. So like, $50 for 20 checkouts. Um,
Wow.
so if they see an indie book priced at like I put my books at like $10 for libraries to account for the fact that multiple people will be checking it out.
Oh,
But like a lot of um libraries will see $10 for an ebook and be like, "Oh, heck yeah."
Mm.
Like that's a bargain. So like I've made a lot of money in libraries, which you can get to with Draft to Digital. And I hear the argument a lot. I'm sorry. I hear the argument a lot that putting your book in Kindle Unlimited makes it more accessible to people who don't have money. But Kindle Unlimited costs money, and for some people, Kindle Unlimited is out of budget.
Mm.
So putting it in the library to me just seems like a more accessible option. So that is also part of like my wide philosophy, is being in libraries, not just as like a means of like getting the royalties from that, but also as a means of being accessible to people who, you know, rely on them.
That's a really good point, because financial accessibility is a thing. Thank you so much for that. KJ?
yeah, so I think the typical definition of like wide versus K, like KU is KU, and then wide is supposedly everything else, you
Mhm.
know. But I agree with Dax. It's there's so many platforms out there, and each one sort of caters to a different audience in a different way, or a segment of your audience in a different way. And so using something like Draft to Digital gets you to all of these little places, because they act as a distributor. Using, what's the other one? Ingram Spark, which I do not love,
Mm.
but they can also, their distribution, so they can get you in a lot of doors. But I've also found, and I've heard this from other indies as well, is people are starting to find new ways to sort of bring their stories to somebody, to other audiences that are out there.
Yeah.
So one of the things I did this last year is I put my book on Royal Road,
Oh.
and it's, chapter by chapter. Typically a lot of the books there are authors who kind of just write as they go. So they'll just sit down, they'll write a chapter, they release it. They sit down, they write a chapter, and they release it. And that really works for some people. For me, I had the book had been published for years. And I thought, well, I'm going to try to test it out. I'm not specifically that audience, but I'm kind of in that audience, kind of audience adjacent. So I thought I'll try it out. And what was interesting was I found a few more readers. It gave me the ability to say, I release the chapter every week this time, but if you want to buy the whole thing, like if you're really interested and want the whole book right away, visit my Patreon and you can
Oh,
go there and you can get the book for $4.99, a digital copy. So that's kind of leaning into two different platforms and giving a specific audience sort of the choice of, do you want to just have that weekly chapter that you read, which a lot of them do, or did you find something interesting and you just want the whole damn thing right now? And oh,
yeah.
by the way, at the end of this book, you can see here's a short story here that's attached to it. Here's a novella here that's attached to it. And so you can kind of talk about your other books at the end. I know that I'm going to bring up Lindsay Buroker. She writes a lot of science fiction and fantasy, a lot of it with romance. And I listened to a podcast one time with her on it. And she said, I've gone wide for years. I decided to try KU, but KU is like the other half of my audience. So for
Mm.
her, she had two audiences for all of her books. One was wide, one was KU. So what she did is she put her book into Kindle Unlimited for 6 months, but she offered a sort of a subscription model. If you want to, every time a new book comes out, if you're not part of the KU audience, you can pay $5.99, become part of my club, and you get the book for free. So that way she found a way to access both audiences
Mm.
without breaking the KU rules. And I thought that was really fascinating. So she ended up with twice the sales, of course.
That's
So
that's fantastic. I love all these ways that people figure out how to do things. Draco, what do you have to say upon this question?
So I started out, wide. I did KU for about like 2 years, I think, and didn't really much care for it. And then I went back wide again. So when I went wide originally, it was before Drafted Digital was a thing. So
Okay.
my original distributor was Smashwords because they used to distribute to everyone but Amazon. They could never get your stuff on Amazon. You had to do that part separate. And then, of course, when Drafted Digital bought them out, I used them. And then I found two because I've been doing this so long. I hated, I hate KDP and their entire process to set up. I despise, especially for your paperbacks, they are so nitpicky. So, and having come from doing Create Space first, I liked it when Create Space was separate
I
for
have heard
design.
that. I have heard people say that back when Create Space was a thing that they liked it.
Their cover creator and process was a lot better, a lot
Mm.
easier for you to do, a lot easier for you to edit in their cover creator. Then when they switched it over to just KDP, just everything is a fight with them. There's even like books that I've already had published and done stuff with, like I'll go in, I'll do edits, and then they won't approve the cover again, and I don't have time for that. So I like Drafted Digital's paperback process much better because it's easier. Their formatting of the inside is also better too. But then putting it out to those other platforms, I find helpful because there are other subscription models that are better than KU or offer more to me, like Kobo, for example.
Hmm.
Their subscription is $9.99 a month, and you get their access to their ebooks and their audiobooks. So instead of having to pay two separate subscriptions to like, for Kindle Unlimited and then again for Audible on Kobo, that's in one place and in one subscription. So like all of my books are there. And then, the ability for them to be in the library is handy. None of mine are because, you have to request the local library to actually get it so that people can reserve it. But, you can see them if you search them.
Mm.
So it's nice to know that that option is there, and also just for any of the other platforms that like, because there's a couple that Draft Digital offer that are like foreign.
Mm.
And, so your foreign fan base would prefer those. I think there's one of them is like German or something. And I don't have a large fan base there, but for those that would want that and they don't deal with Amazon, there you go. They have, that additional access. So, and then, with the modern thing is readers have gotten more aware. So more often we get asked, where is it most profitable for you as the author to buy your books? And the answer, if we sell our own, is us. we're going to
Right.
get more money off of that, because I'm only going to pay for the author copy price, and the rest of it is me. Versus when you buy it on Amazon, I get $7 off the paperbacks and $2 and some change off my ebooks. So, I like having that, the fact that we've expanded enough. And, so now I have my shop on Ko-Fi to sell my physical copies, and I sell the ebooks now too, because people ask. So I'm like, okay, I'll offer both. So if you want to buy directly through me and, be more financially supportive, I guess that option is there.
Right. This is all excellent. I am very, very impressed by the breadth of knowledge here. I'm going to have to write so many notes down after this is done. So, we've heard your opinions about KU. We've heard your opinions about going wide. Have you ever entertained doing a combination at all? That some of your books go KU, some of your books go wide. Like, is are the three of you still? It seems like you're very pro going wide for the genres that you are. And I just want to know if you would ever entertain the notion of some being KU and some being wide. And we'll continue with you, Draco, please.
I did actually, because you have to wait till the end of the quarter to pull them out of KU.
Hmm.
So there were various points where some of my books, because they were entered in at different dates, would be in KU, and then the others would be outside of it. And then also, like when I wanted to experiment originally, I put one book in to start to see, do I like this?
Yes.
Um, and I didn't really notice enough of a benefit personally to keep it that way. Like, because most of my books are part of a series, so it's easier to do that. Like if you have a standalone book and do that experimentation wise. But if you have a series, and like my first series is 6 books, people are going to read that first one like, okay, well, I want the next one. And you don't want to have, okay, well, the first, two you can get in KU, and or you can get them elsewhere, but you can't get the other three. So I personally am not the biggest fan of it, but I feel like if you have a standalone type of book that is caters more to that audience on KU, that's the one instance where I can see that being wiser. Mine, I don't get as much traction because I'm writing queer books. So um, I find it better to just leave mine all the way out, and they're still on Amazon, but offer them everywhere else.
Right, right. That totally makes sense. Thanks. Dax?
I don't think I would ever go back into KU. If I started writing like not lesbian, not queer, not LGBTQ stuff, like if I started writing just like straight romance, I like KU would be the best bet. Um, but no, I don't think so. Um,
Yeah.
I like being wide because I like being able to do fun things with my books and being able to like put it in because if you're in KU, you can't put your book anywhere else. So if somebody wants to do like there was a bundle for trans rights and then a bundle for disability rights back in February and March.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I'd been in KU, they were for cozy books, so I didn't put my books in because my books are not cozy. But if I had a cozy book and it was in KU, I couldn't have joined that fundraiser because it was specifically raising money for different organizations, and I couldn't be in that. And I like to have the rights to do stuff like that with my
Mm.
books. So
No, that's fair. Absolutely. KJ?
Yeah, I think when you're deciding, it doesn't it part of it can come down to what you want, but a lot of it you really have to look at what books you have in your catalog. So I've got, say a science fiction horror. It's not going to do well on KU. But if I have a cozy, romantasy, it's going to do very well on KU. So one book might go wide, one book might go to KU, one book might be perfect for, say, Royal Road or any of the other, chapter by chapter. Another book might be perfect for strictly an audiobook,
Yeah.
so you really have to look at what's the genre of your book, what's the market, what does where is it going to find the most success with the audiences that are out there?
Yeah.
If you've got a book that's just, or maybe you've got a bunch of short stories, you can't really sell them on KU except as an anthology. So why not offer a 99 cents a month to Patreon, and then all of a sudden every month you release a new short story, so somebody's
Oh,
getting something for just hanging out with you. So you're still selling, but you're not selling the typical book model. So there's a lot of ways to do it, but you kind of have to look at your catalog and go, okay, what is the best for this story? And then you also have to look internally and go, okay, I have health issues, I have a very packed schedule, what's the best for my well-being?
mm.
I can't handle 20 platforms wide all the time for 50 different books. So maybe everything is done in very specific ways to sort of help manage health, anxiety, but also lean into the best audiences for each of those books.
Yeah, that's a really good point because I am a disabled person who manages a chronic pain and a chronic fatigue condition. So that's really good advice because sometimes I go, oh, shiny, and
Yep.
want to learn. Oh, well, let me learn how to do this. Let me learn how to do that, and then I'm like, I regret my life choices. So
Yeah. That's the
yeah,
big thing is, I mean, I suffer from seizures. So
okay,
I I have days where I'm great, I've got energy, I can do a lot of stuff, and then I have other days where I'm laying in bed, I feel like crap, I've got animals to feed, and I just don't want to move. So
yeah,
you really
yeah.
have to manage sort of what you can do with sort of how your body's treating you.
Yeah,
You know,
that's such an important point. I'm looking at the time. I'm going to ask my last question among my main questions, and then we're going to go to audience questions. So let's begin with Dax. Is having a brick and mortar store carrying your words important to you? And if yes, do you sell on consignment or how do you handle returns issues? Because I think there's a lot of folks who are, you know, thinking about doing indie publishing and trying to figure out how to manage all the returns things if they want their books in stores. So I just wanted to know, Dax, are your books in stores and how do you manage that returns issue?
So I totally understand the wanting a book, like a physical book, being able to like walk into a bookstore and see it on the shelf. Um, I get that because that was also like my dream for a long time, and that was important to me for a long time. But the longer I've been in this, the less important that is to me. I
Hmm.
still make my books available on like through Ingram Sparks so that paperbacks and hardcovers are available. They are able to be requested at indie bookstores. They are able to be requested at Barnes and Nobles, um, and other shops. And then sorry, Shadow, I stopped petting you. And I also use Book Vault to make my own special editions and sell those directly from my website. So if people want my physical books, I usually direct them to my special editions because they're cheaper and better quality. Um, but they are available, but I don't allow returns. Um, Lisa Chiavari wrote a really good blog post like 2 years ago about why her books are no longer available to be returned. And it's because certain large conglomerate retailers were buying huge stocks of it, letting it sit for 90 days, and if it didn't sell, returning it.
Sure.
And that's as an indie author, if you can afford to have that happen to you, like that's your choice. I don't personally recommend allowing returns. It sucks, and I understand why specifically indie bookstores want that. But like you have to look out for your own self-interest too, especially if you're probably not making a lot of income at the start of your indie journey,
For sure.
you know.
Yeah. You know what? That's interesting. If you have access to that blog, if you could consider putting it in the chat, and maybe even in the Discord after, because I think
Yep.
that's a really good source for people to look at. So thank you for sharing that. Uh,
I'll snag that.
Pardon me?
I said I'm gonna snag that right now.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Draco?
Um, I kind of agree that it's one of those, it would be nice to see my books in brick and mortar stores and, the option is available, but I'm not overly concerned with that anymore. Like it's available on some of those, platforms like, Barnes and Noble and Books a Million, for example. But I don't really make the majority of my sales when I'm doing well in, excuse me, in sales. I make the majority of mine on ebooks. I think most of us probably make more sales, at least quantity wise, as ebooks these days than we do physical copies. Um, I offer them because people like them, and I like to see the physical thing, but I don't find it important anymore to really, um, you know, try, and put extra effort into getting them into a brick and mortar store. And I would not, and I do not allow returns just because, like, I don't publish through Ingram Spark, but I've seen the nightmare stories with
Mm,
authors with those huge returns, and no, I'm not going through that one. Like, I've already spent literal thousands just to publish this book.
right.
So I'm
Absolutely.
not willing to go further in the red when I'm like in some cases still trying to break even after releasing the book, with returns. And, that's kind of disheartening because, when you look and you're like, oh, I got some sales. And then all of a sudden, where'd all the money go? Where'd the sales go? I don't really want to do it. I will protect my piece on that one.
Yeah, that, you know what? I am there with you on that. The returns things sounds like a nightmare for me as well. So, thank you for validating that because I did not want to do that either. KJ, please.
So that's an interesting question because I know that right now with brick and mortar, even publishers are having a hard time getting some of their titles in there. There are very specific large chain bookstores that are saying if you're not one of the top 10 names, then you're not going to be in here. We don't want you. And so even publishers and these authors that are signed with agents and they've been through all of all of the steps that are supposed to be more of the sophisticated, they have the whole team behind them. These companies are going, sorry, we still don't want you. You're not part of the 5 or 10 big names. And so for an indie author, that's disheartening to see because it kind of feels like, okay, well, that shot's out the window. But the
Yeah.
interesting thing for me is I never really bought books at any of the big marketplaces. Like I'd go through and I'd look and stuff, but my two places for books were either a library when I was a kid, or secondhand stores, thrift
Oh,
stores.
okay.
Books that people have read that they've cast off, things that are like 99 cents or 2.99 that you've never even heard of because they're so far down the list and they don't, they're not the 5 to 10 names. They're something new. And so I still do it. Anytime I'm in a thrift store, I always go through and I look for the science fiction fantasy section. I look for what have I not read? Who do I not know? And so when I started out as an author, I never had that ideology of getting into like Barnes and Noble or, any of the other big places. It was always, I want to see my book anonymously show up in a thrift store somewhere.
Isn't that
Something that's
interesting?
yeah, something that somebody read, but then, they moved or they had to scale back their collection, but you can see kind of the curved up pages and the little tears and something that was loved, but now sits and can keep going through circulation for people that can afford it. Because I'm huge on affordability as well.
Mm,
And so if you go to a thrift store, you can buy for $20, you can buy like 10 books, but you go into, a big brick and mortar store and you're looking at one book. And
yeah.
so I think it's another way to really see those titles that we love or those titles that we've never known. Somebody took a chance on it. Maybe they didn't like it, but now it's in circulation again and again and again. And it's really nice to see those
And
warm pages of
you
that.
never know if someone discovers something in a thrift store and then says, I really like this author. I'm going to go find them on the web. I'm going to, right? Right. I mean, I could see myself doing that too. So, you know, there's not just one path. I think we're discussing that today. There's not just one path to getting
Exactly.
our books out there. Okay, you know what? I'm going to turn to audience questions. Let's see what we have here. Okay. Oh, and I noticed also in the chat that Dax did put that blog entry. So thank you so much for that. Okay, let's see. 3 questions directly above this message, Diana says. Okay. Okay. Jade says, would the choice to go with KU versus publishing wide be affected at all if you intended to publish in multiple languages? That's a good question. KJ, what do you have to say about that?
I think it depends on the languages that you're trying to break into. French books and Spanish books, you could probably, be fine going wide, even something like an Italian book or Japanese or Chinese. But if if you want books to get into Kyrgyzstan, then you may have to look at, okay, who in Kyrgyzstan is reading and how are they reading? What's their platform? So really look at the different languages that you sort of want to, the ones you want to target first. Look at what their readers do and don't judge it on like what the US does or what Canada does, because different countries read in different ways. And some readers, especially global readers, are now reading on their phones. So there's interesting ways there to read as well, including like little game apps where you can, pay $2.99 and get like a story plus animation, So kind of look into what the readers are doing there, and then you kind of have to weigh that against, does this do better in KU or is nobody on Amazon and I need to go wide and on specific platforms I've never heard of.
Right. Okay, great. Draco, what do you have anything to add to that?
I would just say that kind of following off it and following up on my earlier point, it depends also on the availability of what's in, whatever language you're doing. Does Amazon operate there?
Yeah.
They don't operate in every country, believe it or not. Like they operate in most of the major first world countries, but there are some countries that Amazon has absolutely no place in. So if they really don't operate there and they don't operate in that particular language, KU would be wasted on you. And you can't, per their terms and conditions, be like, oh, well, I'll have you in KU for everything that you offer, but I'm still going to offer this one country, you know, their thing separately on whatever other platform. That would still be a violation. It will get you kicked off of Amazon's platform entirely if it gets reported. So you kind of want to weigh that. Basically, do your research to know, does Amazon operate there? Is Amazon popular there? And kind of make your choice based off that. If they're not really popular, even if they operate there, I wouldn't personally recommend using KU because it won't be beneficial to you at all.
Right, for sure. Dax?
I don't have translations of my books right now, so I'm not sure about that. But like Draco said, there are some, I know that there's like at least a dozen countries that Kobo operates in that Amazon doesn't.
Oh.
And the same with, I think Google Books also operates in quite a few countries that Amazon doesn't, and as does Apple Books, I think. So knowing what countries you want to target is useful, but yeah, like Draco was saying, if it's a language, it's a region that Amazon doesn't serve, you can't be in both.
Right. You know what, Dax, we're going to stick with you because a question from May is, Dax mentioned itch.io. What are the benefits of that platform for an author?
The benefits are you can offer your book DRM free. So people may have heard about Amazon removing the button that allows readers to download the book and then transfer it via USB. A lot of readers were using that feature to get the book on non-Amazon devices, and they're basically like locking you in now. So if you put your book on itch.io, you can offer it DRM free. You can have itch.io be the merchant of record. If you're selling directly, you understand what I'm talking about. If you haven't considered selling directly, you will find out what merchants of records and like VAT and taxes are. So itch.io, in my opinion, is a way to get as close to direct selling as you can without having to start worrying about like taxes. because as the merchant of record, they'll take care of that. So you don't have to worry about like, oh my gosh, do I owe the EU? Um,
Right.
the other advantage is that you can offer your book in multiple formats. So I usually upload EPUB, MOBI, and PDF for people who like to read on like computers and need PDF, and people who have older devices that can only read MOBI. And then another advantage is that you can more easily group together with other authors and participate in bundles where like you can have like a disabled
Mhm.
characters in space. And it's only books with disabled protagonists in the science fiction genre. And you offer it as like one price to get all the books in it. Um, and that's great for like group promotional activities.
Hmm.
Also, they only take 10% and Amazon takes 70, so you get to keep
Oh,
more.
oh, well, sold. Uh, sorry, KJ, have I asked? I haven't asked you yet, have I?
Itch.io, I have not used it, but I keep hearing about it. So it's on my radar to start, unpacking that whole process.
Right.
So I got nothing.
Okay, no problem. Draco?
I have not used it. I just started hearing about it, so I briefly looked at it to kind of see what it looked like, but I haven't started using it at all. A lot of my, especially my trans mutuals, seem to be very big on them at this point, but I haven't done it yet.
Okay, okay. There's a question, and I feel really badly because I'm not sure how to pronounce this name. Um, it's Isolt, Iseult. Please forgive me, I don't know how to pronounce it. Asks a question. How do you market your books wide, and what advertising methods do you use? So that's one I'm actually got my listening ears on. Draco, what do you do?
Okay, so I've gone a couple of different avenues. My biggest one and one that I find most helpful that I've used for the past 10 years or so, blog tours. I use a specific company. I use Silver Dagger book tours to book all of mine, where we set up dates, and she has agreements with a bunch of bloggers, so my book gets featured on their blog on specific days. Um, that I find gets a lot of new eyes on my product, and I do it for every new release. I've used her ever since I found her. Um, Goodreads groups used to be really good when I started, not so much anymore. Um,
Yeah.
I've used Amazon's little ad thingy or whatever. I did see a little spike from doing that one. I only did a very small budget just to see how well it would do. Um, and none of my books are exclusive to them anymore. So I you kind of have to see what works for you. I've used Fiverr. I found marketing services on there, and like Book Talk obviously is a big help. So if you get a book talker to advertise your book, I've done that one. Did that once with one book talker. It saw some moderate success with my last release. Um, you just kind of, and it changes because I've done it so long. So the way that I started doing advertising is not necessarily the same way that I do it now.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, great. Dax?
I posted a thing in there for itch.io. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Okay, very good. And is the question was what kind of marketing
Oh, sorry. I was
things?
trying. I
You know
was,
what? That's totally okay because I'm actually scrolling up because we have a wonderful active chat here today.
yeah, I was making sure this got in the chat, and I was like, about to go post it on the Discord too. I was like, I need people to have this. But for marketing, because I have a lot of disabilities, I do a lot of automated marketing.
Mhm.
So I have my email newsletter, which has like an automated welcome sequence, and it always goes out like each thing has links to my books at all retailers, and I make sure in my welcome sequence that I say like it's available wide. Click this link and it'll show you all the different places you can get it. And then on social media the same. I have one link, people click on it, they see all of the retailers. So I try to make sure also in a lot of my marketing that I mention that it's available at different retailers. But I mostly try to point people to my direct store or itch.io. Like that is where my focus is. That's where
Okay.
I get the best royalty rate, and that's where I can more directly control the reader's experience. And so I focus, like if you're going wide, I would say figure out where your market is and then focus on that, but make sure people know you're available elsewhere.
Yeah, that
Pick like
totally makes sense.
one or two
Absolutely.
things to really hammer on, but
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay, thank you. KJ, how do you market your books wide and what advertising methods do you use?
Oh boy, advertising. It's changed a lot.
Mm.
Like Dax was saying, something that you used 10 years ago, you don't use today because it doesn't work anymore. So part of the problem that's happening out there is with so many social media platforms, marketing noise becomes louder. There's a
Mm.
lot of noise, and then you sort of feed in these algorithms that are pushing agendas, political agendas, religious agendas, and all this stuff. And then you kind of anything that you say kind of just keeps getting pushed down. It
Mm.
becomes sort of the lower level of that noise, and it's really hard to find those spaces that you can market effectively. Um, it's something that I'm struggling with right now, is because I can talk about my books, but I don't want to keep talking about my books. I want other people to talk about my books.
Right.
But then it's like setting up for other people to talk about them has been taking so much time that it's, and then it becomes, oh my goodness, I've done 30 hours worth of work and we're not even there yet. And you
Mm.
become exhausted with it. And then it's the daily, the repetitive, so anything you can automate, anything you can keep focused and tight, like Dax was saying, um, a single thing that leads to sort of a portal that gives somebody access to everything.
Yeah, yeah.
And so you have to play with it. You really do, because what might work for me may not work for Dax. What
Right.
might work for Dax may not work, for anybody else. And so you have to kind of go, what is my genre for this book? What is my audience? Who am I as an author? And you kind of look at those things, look at the spaces that you're comfortable with, think about the timing that you have to devote to this, think about the funds that you have to devote to this. What can you do for free versus what's going to overwhelm you, and you have to just start playing.
Yeah, yeah.
It's,
And there's
oh
always that balance, right? Of you
yeah,
don't want, say, your socials, for example, to be all about buy my book because people switch off that too, right? So there's that balance. I'm just looking at the time. We got 10 more minutes. I want to sneak in this question here. Jenny asks, is it possible to sell ebooks on Amazon without being on KU at all?
yes,
So we'll continue with you then, KJ.
yes, absolutely. You can go on Amazon wide. The trick to learn is that you can go on Amazon through Ingram Spark, or you can go on Amazon through KDP. But if you go through KDP, your book is always available. If you go through Ingram Spark and say, I want my books to go to Amazon, they may not necessarily always show that they're in stock.
Oh,
People have found that Ingram Spark, with using, distributing to Amazon, will show that your books are constantly out of stock. But Amazon, if you go directly on that platform, then it'll always show your books in stock. And it's an instant, one click for an ebook, or print books always in stock. So it's something to think about as you go. And then as you're setting up, make sure you look for that checkbox says, do you want to put this in Kindle Unlimited? No, if you want to go
okay.
wide, you do not want to put it in there, because that way then you have control. You can have your book on Amazon. You can have your book on Royal Road. You can have your book as part of a bundle. You can have it in an app on somebody's phone. You can have it on Google Books. So I think that's what, you want to make sure that you've got the control that you require to make sure that book gets to the right audience.
Yeah, that is very good information for folks. Draco?
Well, yeah, obviously, I'm gonna add, even if you go directly through KDP, you have to go an extra step to enroll it in Kindle Unlimited. So, yeah, you can publish without being in there. Mine are all still on Amazon, and none of my books are in Kindle Unlimited. But I will say this: if you Draft to Digital, also will distribute over to Amazon. But one thing to keep in mind, if you intend to do pre-orders, Amazon will not put them up if they come from Draft to Digital
Oh,
until the day of their release. They will not do pre-orders unless it's directly through them for some reason. I don't know if they do it through Ingram Spark, but I know I did find that out with Draft to Digital. Like everywhere else would put it up for pre-order that is an option. Amazon will not list it at all until the day of its actual release. So if
okay.
you like to do pre-orders and you're going to publish through Draft to Digital and send it to Amazon, just understand it will not hit Amazon until the day of the actual release.
Okay. No,
Um,
very, very good to know. I was totally not aware of that.
Yeah,
Um,
I kind of liked using that method just because it's nice to be able to streamline where all of my royalties are coming from. So I like that they actually have that option. But and the reporting and everything being in one place is great, but that's just something to keep in mind. If you are big on doing the pre-order thing, won't show up on Amazon.
okay. Okay. Excellent. Thank you. Dax?
So it is possible to be wide and have it. You just don't select that Kindle select button. If you do accidentally select it, you can email Amazon and ask them to release you from the 90-day agreement early. So it is possible to get all your books out at once. Just tell them remove these books from Kindle Unlimited and they will. Um, but uh, I've been contemplating taking my books off of Amazon for reasons. Um, but the thing about Amazon is I asked a lot of my readers, like, even though they hate Amazon, they use it as a search engine.
Oh,
So
okay.
they find books through the Amazon recommendation algorithm and then go buy it elsewhere. So if your book isn't on Amazon, some people might not even know it exists because they're not going to go to the Kobo site and look for books there. They're going to look for it on Amazon, see what the reviews are. Because like Kobo, as much as I love Kobo, like people on Kobo don't review as much as people on Amazon do. So Amazon's going to host a huge number of your reviews. So people will go there, search for your book, read the reviews there, and then go elsewhere to read it. So like even readers who don't like Amazon are going on Amazon to use it to read reviews and stuff. So I'm like really torn right now about whether I leave it up for discoverability and just tell my readers not to buy it there. I don't like Amazon either. So
It's very complex, isn't it? Right? Like, I was in a book club, and there was a book that was written by a Black mental health advocate who I really respect, and the book was only available on Amazon. And I said to my book club, "I'm sorry, I don't care if it's on the Zon. I'm supporting the work of marginalized disabled authors." Um, Everything is nuanced, isn't it?
Yeah,
Right? Have you folks
yeah.
found yourself in those positions too, where you wanted so much to support authors in different marginalized communities that you said, okay, you know what, Amazon's not my favorite, but I really want to support this person's book. Have Just feel
Yeah.
free to jump in with that.
Well, all the time, especially when you fold into how you read.
Yeah,
You know, I used to read only physical copies, and then my mother bought me a Kindle, and I'm like, no, I'll never do this. And sure enough, Kindle is that's how I read now because it makes sense to me. It's something I can read at night during the day. And as much as I don't want to support Amazon and a lot of their practices, I do want to support these authors, but I also want to be able to read the way that makes sense to me.
yeah,
I
yeah,
can't read on my phone. So,
yeah,
and a lot of times when authors sell independently, they put it on a PDF. I can't read it sitting on a computer either. I can't
yeah.
relax. I feel like I'm working.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's hard to, I think you have to like, just, make yourself as available as you can for discoverability, for ease of use, and for hitting the right audiences. And then the rest of it really is out of your control.
For sure. And I hate to say this, but we're coming up to the end. Like, hello, I could have talked to you folks for at least 5 more hours. So let's do final words and tell folks where they can find your stuff. Let's start with you, Draco.
Well, all of my books are available on every major ebook platform, and wherever the physical books are sold. So Amazon, Barnes and Noble, like I said, Books A Million. And then I sell them on my Ko-Fi shop, which is, if you have Ko-Fi, my screen name is at Draco's Den. It's the same as all of my social media handles. And it's in my link tree that was linked in the Discord as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Dax?
My final thought is that at the end of the day, even though we're all doing this because we love writing, it's still a business.
Mm.
And even if you hate Amazon a lot and you need like the income, like, and you make the business choice to be in Kindle Unlimited, like I'm not going to fault people for the business choices that they have to make to survive in this nightmare world we live in. So just make the, like, research your genre, research who your ideal reader is, and find out where they read and focus on marketing to them, whether that's wide or Kindle Unlimited. But I want to answer this question. I've never been in the position of being forced to buy a book on Amazon to support an author, because almost every time I've encountered that, I've seen that they also have paperbacks.
Oh, nice.
And I can get those paperbacks elsewhere. So I'm like, okay, I've never had to be like, oh, this is the only way I've bought it, because like I'll either see that they have a paperback, or I'll do a little digging and be like, ooh, they've got it in paperback. And like I've seen a lot of authors who are in Kindle Unlimited offer like signed paperbacks, because when Kindle Unlimited is only ebooks. So like if you go Kindle Unlimited and then offer like signed paperbacks on your own store, like you are solving like 7 problems at once.
Okay, fair enough. And where can folks buy your works?
Dax.inc is the quickest way to get to me.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And KJ, last but not least, you're all not least, but go ahead, KJ.
I was going to say as a final thought is, if you're thinking about publishing and you haven't taken that leap yet, or even if you've already started, look at having a newsletter. You don't have to do it all the time. You don't have to put a ton of energy into it. It can be once a month where you just say, hey, here's what's going on in my life, quick, short paragraph to kind of keep touch with your fan base. And then here's where to buy my book. Here's the bundle I'm part of. Support this group. It's just little quick paragraphs. It doesn't have to be a wall of text, because nobody's going to read that. But what it is a way to talk to your audience specifically, people that have already found their books and they love them, and they're going to keep coming back every single time you write a book. So if you don't have a newsletter, find a platform that works for you, something that fits within your budget, and make sure that, you have a way to keep continually talking to that fan base.
And how do people find you? Because we've hit the 3 o'clock mark. So how do people find you?
I am at kjherowick.com or at KJ Herowick on all the socials. I'm in and out. I write both fantasy and science fiction. I lean into romance and horror. I also write nonfiction as part of I Know Why She Stayed. So, and if you ever just want to ping me and say hi, you can just ping me and say hi. I'm absolutely here to say hi. So.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much to our 3 amazing guests. I have learned so much, as I said, and I hope you folks have too. We're going to be hanging around on the Discord for a little bit after that. So if you want to chat with all of us, we'll be there for the next half hour, right? We'll be doing that.
Yep.
And otherwise, thanks so much for attending, and we will see you soon.